Hi, I'm Connor Fowler.
And I'm Matt Smith.
You're now listening to Apocalypse Duds. We are in the Bible bunker with Barry. Our next guest is perhaps one of our most accomplished, or we have tricked yet another person into appearing on our program. More than just an attorney, a man of God, a movie obsessive, he led lobbying organization Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Barry has been on Fox News and other major networks. He just released his brilliantly titled memoir, Paid to Piss People Off: Peace, Porn, and Prayer. He's also a stand up comic. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome the Reverend Barry Lynn.
It is very nice to be with both of you.
Hell yeah. Connor, when Connor told me you were going to come on, it was a very exciting thing. So yeah, sounds.
Are you living an exciting enough life if you think this is? Look, if this is the high point of your week, that's okay. If it's a high point of your year, I suggest.
Yeah, admittedly, I probably do not lead a very exciting life.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Outside of playing music, I take it pretty chill. So
good.
We just argue about the most idiotic stuff.
Yes. Connor and I, for how close we are as friends, we love to fucking argue with each other. So.
Yeah.
We've been talking about saddle shoes recently.
Saddle shoes?
So I'm interested in a particular type of saddle shoe. It's a brown leather with a brown suede panel on the top, right? They're really like kind of ugly, maybe with a red clay sole.
Yeah.
Matt does not think this is a good idea.
No.
And actually, I polled a few other people, and they all said it was a bad idea. So I know I'm doing it.
You know what's a worse idea about footwear? When I grew up, I lived in this 2-bedroom house across from a exit ramp on a superhighway. It wasn't a very nice place, but we didn't have a lot of money. And I used to buy shoes from the back of magazines for $19. I ruined my feet with those shoes. But the idea of spending like $25 on a pair of shoes, I'm not even going to ask you about the saddle shoes, how much they cost.
Well, I was looking at there's a pair of polo saddle shoes on eBay for $70.
$70
There's some Alden. Well, and the problem is they're made in China. They're not even American made, No. They're not even they're probably made by a child. And we try to not do that on this show.
Try not to do that. Nope.
It is a good thing to avoid, indeed.
Absolutely.
So we're here in Pennsylvania. Is that Bethlehem?
Bethlehem of Pennsylvania.
Nice.
It is Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So you're hanging out. You are buying shoes out of a magazine. What magazine is it?
I think it was a Parade magazine, which was included in your Sunday newspaper as a kind of add-on, and it was on the back cover, like every other week.
Were they like dress shoes? Were they like sneakers?
They were dress shoes, but they were plastic. They weren't leather. They weren't even leather. They were just but they came in weird colors. And I remember getting a green felt shoe.
Wow. I taught after my own heart, really.
I taught school at the Cardinal Cushing Central High School for Girls, which was the only integrated school in the city of Boston in the early 70s before public schools.
Really?
And the Archdiocese of Boston, to its credit, decided it was going to keep 2 schools open and encourage non-Catholic teachers and students to attend and give scholarships to Hispanic and African American students to integrate it. And it was a marvelous experience. And in fact, curiously, about a week from now, they've invited me to come to their 50th high school reunion.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow. So you think you're going to see your students?
I'm going to see my students.
Wow.
And
that's really special.
I'll tell you one other story about the school. I taught a class called The Darker Side, which is about this kind of phenomenon that was of great interest at that time in the early 70s, and as exorcisms. The Exorcist movie had just come out. And I said to the students, look, this thing is rated R, but if I get a permission slip from your parents, I'll be your guardian. And so
Wow.
I did. And it's amazing how many people's parents had exactly the same handwriting. Exactly.
Yes.
The big day comes and it snows and the schools are closed. But I felt an obligation, a kind of moral obligation, to show up in case some of the students decided to come also. 100 students showed up with their boyfriends.
That's
And
amazing.
they screamed from the moment the credits stopped and the movie began until the very end. It took me years before they re-released it, and I was able to kind of hear it because it was just. But I had the opportunity to meet this woman who was the stunt double for Linda Blair in that movie, because there were some things that
Wow.
were just too nasty, and they wouldn't let. I think Linda was 15 at the time. They wouldn't let her do the masturbation with a crucifix scene.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Eileen White's, she's a wonderful person. She wrote a book. As far as I know, this is the biggest thing she ever did in her actressing career. But it was fun to meet her, and I told her the story, and she thought it was funny.
That's fucking amazing. Hell yes. So let's see. We've mentioned Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Boston, and now you're in Baltimore?
I'm in Hanover, Massachusetts.
Hanover. Okay.
Hanover.
Cool. Yeah.
No relationship to Hanover, New Hampshire, which is
Or
where
Hanover,
Dartmouth
Pennsylvania.
is. Yeah, well, I don't know much about, but I live.
That's where the pretzels are.
It is. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because in Hanover, New Hampshire, I mean, with all due respect to any of your listeners that may live there, but this was like the most unpleasant year and a half I ever spent anywhere.
Wow.
I mean, here is a college.
Yeah.
Everybody, I'm sure a lot of nice people went there, but Dinesh D'Souza went there.
Wow, great guy. Lovely man.
I think he dated Laura Ingraham.
That's a power couple indeed.
I think they've broken up, but Laura, I was on her show quite a bit.
Yeah, because you have relationships with these people who are like, they're like villains.
Yes,
Dinesh D'Souza is not a villain. Dinesh D'Souza wishes he was a villain.
I know.
But some of the people who you have gone toe-to-toe with.
Oh, they are. And I mean, now, I have to say, there are a couple people that I used to debate all the time, one of whom I want to mention. His name is Rob Schenck. Rob Schenck was probably the most effective anti-choice activist in the country. And I used to, I was on TV with him a lot. We had debates at colleges. And he's now changed his mind completely. And on another podcast, I had him on, and he said that he thought so many times during the 20 or 25 years that we would have these arguments that maybe I was right. And he said on the show that I realized I was mainly wrong and you were mainly right. And he's now an opponent of Christian nationalism. He's the guy that used to hook up Republican major donors with Supreme Court justices. And he's completely repudiated all of that. And he's even testified just before the Democrats lost the House, before the Judiciary Committee, about what he had done and how wrong it was.
That's amazing. That's
Can
I ask you? Sorry, go on, Matt.
No, I was just going to say that's like the one out of, I don't even know, like, maybe there's more success stories with something, but like that's maybe the only one I've heard of.
That's what one of the driving questions of this is like, what do we do? What do we do with these people? They are not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. How do we coexist, right, without like shooting each other.
Yes, exactly. And but one of the things, and we can talk about this in more detail, but I find that if you spend a lot of time with conservatives, that you do find certain things that they agree with. I'll give you a couple of examples. For
Sure.
about a year and a half, I was on every afternoon for 3 hours with Pat Buchanan,
Right.
and Pat's as pretty much as conservative as you can get, but he hated these so-called free trade agreements,
Right.
like NAFTA.
Yeah.
And so he and I would agree, and then we'd bring Ralph Nader into the studio. He was against them too. So it's
Right.
Barry Lynn, Ralph Nader, and Pat Buchanan all saying, "Stop NAFTA." And we thought maybe it was going to be stopped. And then there was this abominable debate between Al Gore and the third party candidate at the time, and Ross Perot. And yeah, I was having trouble remembering his name. But
well, I think many people will forget Ross Perot.
Yeah.
So Buchanan walks in to the studio and looks at me and he goes, "We lost everything," because Ross Perot did a miserable job in that debate on Larry King. And I think that was the end of the opposition to NAFTA, which has turned out to be pretty much as bad as its critics thought.
Yeah. Oh,
if not even worse. I mean, not to be that person, but like it's hard to even say like in one sentence precisely how bad it is for all of the people involved.
So like this is an anecdotal story, but I once worked for a store that worked with an American and a Canadian suiting factory, which the American one was eventually bought by the Canadian, or the people that own the Canadian one. Okay. Sets the stage. We could order a cashmere jacket from the Canadian company for literally half the cost of the American company because of like however the fuck, and I'm not a super smart person, but like whatever NAFTA regulation allowed Canada to import cashmere charged no duty whatsoever.
Yep.
And then the American company had to pay out the fucking ass to get this fabric. And it was just, I was just like, I just, how did no one think this was a bad, or no one being in our fucking government?
Well,
this was a bad idea.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like the people in power, want it to happen. They make it happen, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks.
It's chopping off your nose to spite your face.
Right.
And it's just like, I'm a normal-ass person working a normal-ass job, and I can understand this, but these motherfuckers can't or won't.
Well, it's meant to be frustratingly above your head, right?
Yeah, and it's gotten worse. I want to tell you, I spent so much time, I roamed the halls of Congress, not only for Americans United, but for the ACLU for many years, and working on amnesty for war resistors before that. And
so cool, man. So cool.
I mean, it was great stuff. But the important thing about it is you could actually form alliances, even if temporary ones, with the worst people who happen to agree with one thing. Like, for example, I did radio every Friday for years with Oliver North. And you'd think, well, what in the world would he have in common with me? And it turned out to be the death penalty. I hate the death penalty. I mean, I absolutely hate it. And I was once asked to moderate a panel at the big anti-death penalty convention, which was in Chicago that year. And the woman that runs it said, would you kind of MC this panel? And I said, what's the topic? And she said, the topic is conservatives against the death penalty. I said, well, why would you possibly want me to do that? And she said, because you play well with conservatives. And the next day, speaking of people that you kind of move every once in a while.
Our sister in Garms, Eva Kuehl, founded her brand Epaulet in 2008 and has remained dedicated to making quality garments in the USA at a fair price ever since. Known for her discerning taste in fabric, she searches endlessly to offer things not seen anywhere else, culminating in a fantastic assortment from casual to formal. Ava sources some of the most amazing fabrics available and offers them in an inclusive size range from 34 to 48. You can message her for personal help in finding your size too. If you're looking for a go-to clothing resource, visit epaulettebrand.com and enter the code DUDCAST10 for 10% off your order.
Jay Sekulow was not only the top lawyer for Pat Robertson for a long time, but he even defended Donald Trump during his first impeachment trial.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's why I think why that name rings a bell.
Yeah,
because he
and
was in the news.
But we did, if I did 100, I mean, I must have done 500 debates with Jay. And so after I got invited to this death penalty thing, I called him up. I said, Jay, I've never talked to you about this. I know we disagree about it. What do you think about the death penalty? He said, I'm against it under all circumstances. And he said, it's not just from some legal technicality. It's just immoral to give the government the right to kill you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I said, would you give me a quote that I can use? And he said, I'll do it better. I'm going to borrow Pat Robertson's recording equipment tomorrow. We'll set up a time. You ask me questions. I'll give you answers, and you can run the tape at the conference.
Oh, that's awesome.
Blew everybody away.
Yeah.
And then the very last debate I had with Jay was at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And in the middle of this discussion, he says, I don't see why anybody's against Medicare for all. And it blew people away. Couldn't believe he had said that. And he said, it just makes good sense. Why wouldn't you be in favor of it?
Right.
Because I'm on Medicare.
Right.
And I'm not against it, but I think it could certainly be better. And most people of my age, 75, most people, they want glasses, they want hearing aids.
Yeah.
You can't get any of those with Medicare.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Dental care.
Yeah, you can't get it.
Yeah. I feel like anything that is supposed to elongate and support your health should be fucking included with any type of health care. Like there's no fucking reason why independent insurance in our current system is absolute garbage for sure. But anything like Medicare, any type of healthcare should have dental, vision, because you need these things to live.
Absolutely. This is not a minor matter. And, as the title of the book, I mean, I was kind of blessed by actually having jobs where I could do good stuff and actually get paid for it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, we're going to get into
people. Yeah. I mean, tons of people do that work for free. Right. Basically.
Yeah.
And I had a little question, which I hope is like a thread through this.
All right.
We could go, I guess, for the first attempt at the answer of this question. Like, how do you, we have a question written that calls it an olive branch, right? Like, how do you extend an olive branch to those Christians out there to say, like, we're not going to take away your stuff. Like, you're going to be okay. Right. We really are on the same team here.
Yep.
Sort of like you're talking about with all of these nice men.
Yeah. There are a couple of religious right women too.
They're truly deranged.
No, but there's some extremely effective people. There's a woman I've lost track of her. I'm not sure, but she was a superstar of Christian radio named Janet Parshall, and you could have conversations with her, and she was remarkably effective and vastly more knowledgeable and articulate than so many of the men that were used all the time. And
sounds like a woman to me.
On the right, she was not that popular. She was never Ann Coulter.
Of course.
Why
would who could be?
Who the hell would want to be Ann Coulter? I would never want to be a, I heard Ann Coulter give many, many speeches, and we were on occasionally on things. But when she'd go to a new city, she'd say the same things to start the speech that she said in the last city. When I would go, and I traveled all over the country, and I would watch the local news before I'd show up at the dinner or whatever I was supposed to do, and find something to connect me with that local community so I could tell a story or make a joke about
Right.
that particular city. That's I considered that possibly the most important thing I did to get ready for anything. But
Interesting.
most people think let's they're going to read the same speech they wrote a year and a half ago and
Right.
make a reference to where they're speaking at that moment. And that's terrible.
Yeah,
That's sloppy.
yeah. Another little aside here. How did you feel when you saw that Pat Robertson died this past weekend?
Well, I mean, you Pat was, yeah, I'm not happy when anybody dies, really. I mean, I'm sure they think they're going to be at the right hand of God. I don't know where they
Yeah.
are or even particularly care, but I mean, it's one of the things you have to get over when you do the kind of stuff I spent my life doing is you have to get over hating people. Because if you look to just hate people, you're going to find loads of opportunity for that, but it's never a good way to start.
Okay.
You can hate everything they stand for, which in the case of, Pat Robertson, Pat Buchanan, Jerry Falwell, I hated virtually everything. I can't even think of a single thing where Jerry Falwell and I agreed. Nothing.
Well,
You
it
know,
would be pretty hard. It would be pretty hard.
you know what bothers me more than anything about Falwell? Um, he didn't he didn't work at learning anything. Robertson, to his credit, did actually try to keep up. I was on Fox News many, many times with Jerry Falwell, and one day he was in Washington, and we were in the green room at Fox. A green room's where you're supposed to sit down with the other guests and not kill each other or whatever.
Well, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, so what's the green room like? Briefly, like, is there water there? Are there
Yeah,
chairs?
no, there's water there. If it's a green room in the morning, there's a whole breakfast there.
Yeah.
There's lox and bagels there. There's
Wow.
fruit juices there.
Is
And
there
then,
enough? Is there enough liquor to make you lose your mind? Because I feel
well,
like
I don't
that's
think there is liquor, but I'm kind of a teetotaler. I mean, I really gave
Gotcha.
up drinking about, I think 50 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like I would have to be the most drunk I've ever been to be on Fox News. So yeah, I commend you on that, sir.
Well, it
I've
was,
dreamt about being on Glenn Beck's program many times. I think that would be an amazing match. We would smash each other's heads into each other's heads over and
you
over
might do
again.
that. Yeah, Glenn
Beautiful.
Beck, he's the only right-wing person of my generation that I was never on his show. I was supposed to be on it. I was on it, but somebody was filling in for him. But
Oh.
just for comic relief, I subscribe to the non-paid version of The Blaze.
I used to write for the Blaze. I'm not even joking.
Right,
I used to write for the Blaze. I worked for this financial copywriting organization in Baltimore, and I wrote for the Blaze. One of their most successful leads ever, which I think still leads. Where will you be when the dollar dies?
Where will you be where the dollar dies?
Right. See, it's my genius. My genius. Like, they had all kinds of anti-Obama stuff. They had all kinds of Israeli water filtration systems. Like, buy gold.
But you know who else is gone? Glenn Beck was always on the wrong side.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
But Russell Brand, do you know who Russell Brand is?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
He's a great comedian, and he was kind enough to, when I was at Americans United for Separation of Church and State, we did this whole year, 2 years actually, called Voices United for Separation of Church and State. And there were comedians, there were singers, there were bands, all of which were in favor of separation of church and state. And Russell Brand and Sarah Silverman did this benefit for us in California. And I always would call in to the box office if it was a big venue and go, "How are the tickets going?" And when I called about the Russell Brand appearance, they said, "We have $1,000 meet and greets available." I said, "You have $1,000 meet and greets?" I said, that's a little pricey for me, but I figured if that's all they have left, everybody will be there. The place will be sold out. So we get there an hour before, go to the box office. They say, "How the tickets going?" She said, "Oh, we got hundreds of tickets." I said, "Really?" So then I called a couple of my friends in Los Angeles, and because this was in LA, and I said, "Are you coming tonight? Is it going to be a great show?" They said, "Oh no, we can't afford $1,000." So
Oh,
and Sarah Silverman, if you asked her to this day, she would say somebody sabotaged that event and lied about the ticket sales because they didn't want anybody to come.
what
And
the fuck?
yeah,
Wow.
well, I'm not a Ticketmaster fan, and neither's the government anymore because they've just filed an antitrust suit.
Right.
Right.
Finally, which like they've been talking about since the early 90s.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, the
I mean,
fees are ridiculous. The availability is ridiculous. But, my daughter's a lawyer and she writes about antitrust. And she just sent me an article she did about this antitrust lawsuit.
hell yeah.
I don't know anything about antitrust, but it's good to know that those for whom you have been a parent have gone on to other things and now know enough to write about antitrust.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's like,
Yeah.
I don't know this, I guess the technical sort of machinations of that, like how they're going to do this to Ticketmaster, but we support it, of course.
We support it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, Barry, what's kind of the timeline that led you into the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I never expected to do any of this. I expected that I would go to seminary, I would be in some kind of a moderate size city like Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I'd have a church there, and I'd just be a traditional pastor. But life, as they say, had other plans.
Right.
And when I was in college, one spring break, I said to one of my roommates, I said, how are you going to spend the break? And he said, "I'm going to London." I said, "Well, that must be fun." And he
Right.
said, "No, it's no, because my girlfriend's pregnant and we have to go there to get an abortion." And I said,
Wow.
"What?" I said, "You live in like Massachusetts. Don't they have liberal laws there?" He said, "No, we have to do that." So I hooked him up with a group out of the Judson Memorial Church in Greenwich Village, and they routinely help people go to other countries to obtain abortions. But that's the thing that got me. I said that for a church to have that much power, I mean, they can do anything they want, they can say anything, but once you try to turn the laws of the country into what you think are your theological beliefs, you have crossed a line. That's the first time I really started to think seriously about what separation of church and state meant.
Right.
And that just propelled me into thinking, man, something's got to give. And when I had an opportunity, I had worked with Americans United for a long time and been on panels and spoke at their conventions. But when I found out there was an opening to run the organization as its executive director, I was just incredibly fascinated. Plus, I was living in Hanover, New Hampshire. Remember that place?
A dream.
That S-hole place?
Right.
Well, it was, and so we were living there, and my wife was having a reasonable time, and I was supposed to teach doctors how to communicate. After
that's a
24
tall
hours,
order.
I realized they don't want to learn how to communicate.
Right.
They don't want to talk to the rest of us. They just
No.
want to publish papers and go to go to these conferences and present those papers and never speak to a human being. Years and years after I left, a woman from the New York Times who covered medical stuff wrote a whole book about why healthcare professionals need to talk to real people. And she was appalled. And people that she would attempt to interview for the book would say, well, how long is this going to take? And she'd say, well, it's not going to take more than a half an hour. And the person would say, well, a half hour talking to you means a half hour I'm not working in my lab.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
That's
God.
true.
What?
That's true. But when I interviewed her, I used to do radio a lot, including hosting radio. And I said, but what do they think? And she said, it's because they think it's a waste of time because it's not going to get them anywhere. And, and that's what a lot of them think. And I worked for a doctor up there, and he used to send me to places about his project, which was creating interactive video discs. Perhaps you remember, but perhaps you're not aged enough to remember video discs, these giant things that were as big as an LP record.
Yeah,
laser disc, right?
Yeah, laser discs. And they had invented this way that you would sit down with a nurse, and if you had a BPH, enlarged prostate. That was the first one they did. And they'd have people, and you'd watch somebody talk, and then the person would say, well, what do you think where would you like to go with this? And then they'd have a series of questions, and you'd touch the screen and hit a question like, does this mean I might get prostate cancer? And then there would be somebody there talking about what the answer is to that question, which is answer is kind of no. And then but I thought these are so heavy and big, and they're going to be displaced. I said to this doctor, I said, they're going to come up with really smaller ones, or maybe you want to think about doing more health conditions or non-healthy conditions and put them on a VHS tape, a video cassette.
Right.
You wouldn't have any of that. So he invents the thing. He sells it to Sony. He's on Good Morning America. Then he kind of gets bored with the whole thing. So he used to be invited to go to medical conventions, and I was living in Hanover, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Hanover. And
right.
My wife and kids were still in Washington for about a year. And, so I'd go home every other weekend. And there was an event in Baltimore, speaking of Baltimore. And
woo,
woo. I love Baltimore.
We can talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so he'd say, well, you go and explain what we're doing. I said, I'm not a doctor. Why do I want to go to a doctor's convention? No, but you know how to explain this. I said, yes, I do know how to explain it. So I'd go to these conventions, and I literally couldn't believe it, because nobody ever did what I always do, which is start out with some anecdote, something that's if not related directly to the city, something to make it clear that we're going to have a somewhat lighthearted conversation about a very serious subject. They didn't like that. They didn't understand that. Nobody ever did that. And I can't believe people can give a presentation that might last an hour and not say something humorous or make an effort to be humorous.
Right. Yeah.
How can you do that? And the answer is you can if you're in that medical world, because they don't expect you to do anything but read your. How about PowerPoint?
Yeah.
I hate PowerPoint.
Show me your slide deck, baby.
PowerPoint. It's bad all the time, but it's worse when all you see on the PowerPoint are exactly the words that are being spoken by the speaker.
They love that. They love that. They love that
They
more
love
than
it.
anything.
I know that. So I'm at a conference of physical anthropologists. I didn't even know
Sorry.
there were
Yeah. What is
physical
that? What is that?
anthropologists.
What does that
They,
mean?
they, they, they look at the development of species, and they're big on evolution. They
Okay.
actually
Well,
look at
so
the
it's
evidence
right
and
in your
go,
wheelhouse,
hey,
right?
and so they had this panel. It had 12 people on it, and everybody except me had a PowerPoint. I stood up. I said, look, I don't have a PowerPoint. And the reason I don't have a PowerPoint is I used one once and I caught the flu afterwards. And I said, I am never going to use it again. But I said, I do have something to show you. And I pulled out of a paper bag a monkey puppet. And I said, he is my science advisor, and you better take a good listen to anything he says. So at the halfway point, when everybody was waiting for the next 6 people, they said, Barry, no one's going to remember anything that was ever said, but everyone will remember the day the monkey came out of the paper bag.
Wow. I think
So,
that's probably the title.
Yeah, yeah. The monkey out of the paper bag. Just curious. I grew up Southern Baptist. I'm staunchly an atheist at this point. Had a lot of friends over the years that went to seminary, and/or like Liberty University or whatever.
yeah,
And I've heard anecdotally that a lot of people that enter seminary come out basically disbelieving all of the shit that led them to going to seminary.
sure.
Did you have any kind of like struggle with that?
No, I mean, I don't want to get too deeply in the weeds here, but I'm
Mhm.
very impressed with something called process theology. And the idea of process theology boils down to this: everything changes, evolution is real. Why don't we think of God as being an evolving person? And I was on an atheist podcast a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said, well, what do you mean by that? And I told a story about a guy who had written a book, a very prominent attorney, trying to figure out if God exists. His conclusion was he wasn't sure. But I said, when you look at those attributes often attributed to God, like all knowing,
Mhm.
you go the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. Here is God. He creates the Garden of Eden, and one of the first things that happens, he loses Adam and Eve. He doesn't know where
Right.
they are.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
idea that oh yeah, God's all knowing, but he lost his two created humans in a matter of minutes. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
It's
not.
gorgeous.
I'm
Yeah.
not an atheist that like wants is adamant and combative about like whatever people believe. Like I don't give a shit.
Matt is probably the least annoying atheist I've ever met.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's partly because I have learned things and like
You
I
did it,
am,
right?
yeah.
You had like a very religious upbringing.
Oh, super. But like I love my parents to death. They are, in my opinion, what a Christian is supposed to be. And I know that this is, this exists for any religion. Just because, like,
Yes, it does.
just because I don't believe in it doesn't mean that, like, I can't appreciate it enriching someone else's life as long as, like, my golden rule is don't be an asshole. And so, like, as long as people aren't an asshole and, like, not shoving shit down people's throats, then I don't care. Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon because I also, like, I have friends of many different religions, and, like, I would even say, like, astrology and things are a sort of, like, belief system in certain ways. But, like,
all that stuff.
Yeah, just because, like, just because I don't believe in whatever doesn't mean that, like, I am superior to anybody else.
No, exactly. But you're right. So many of them do. And if you can't hook them on something, the other thing is they're not nearly as Bible literate as they think. And I'll give you a very specific example. For a long time. I mean, I'm now on the board of the Kurt Vonnegut Library and Museum.
Oh, nice.
No way! Whoa! You buried the lead. You bury the lead. Ah!
Before you move on, are you friends with Lewis Black? Because he is
very,
also
very good friends with Lewis.
Holy. Follow-up question: Can you possibly help us get him on this program?
You can't put him on the spot like that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I doubt that he's doing many of these.
He's on his last tour right now.
He's on.
I have a picture of me with him when he came to UMBC, and everyone in the student events board was like, "This guy Connor is like you, Lewis Black," and so we posed for a picture like this. So maybe
he is in my top 5 comedians of all time.
Yeah.
Like him, Carlin Hicks, they're like my prophets in a lot of ways.
The Holy Trinity.
The Holy Trinity. Yeah.
You know, I forget where I was going. Oh no, I know where I was going. But anyway, so they had me do the fundraiser for the library last November.
How did you get involved? I'm sorry. How did you get involved with the Vonnegut Library?
Through Lewis, frankly.
That's awesome.
He said Barry Lynn's a kind of funny guy and he's smart. And
did you guys like go to school together?
No, we didn't. I met him because I got this big award called the Puffin Foundation Award. Mm-hmm. It's a large amount of money, and it's done in conjunction with the Nation magazine also. And so they gave me this award and had me come to New York, and he turned out to be the MC.
I see.
And I said hello to him before. I didn't really know. I'd never met the guy. I'd seen him many times. So I stood up when they gave me the award, and I said, I want to thank you for the award, and I really want to thank you for having Lewis Black be the MC, because it's the first time I've been able to see him without paying $125. Not knowing him, I thought, well, maybe he's funny, but maybe he's going to be offended by this.
He's not that funny,
he wasn't. No, he was. But so we actually were back in Washington. We had a conversation at a fundraiser down there a few weeks ago, and but one of the things I said at when I did the keynote address for the library, I talked about the many things that people want to censor. And of course, not everybody, but lots of people, they want to censor pornography. They want to censor ads for products they don't approve of. And they also don't like a lot of children's books. And one of the ones that, my wife and I read to our grandkids up here is Charlotte's Web, about,
of course,
friendship between a pig and a spider.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the Christian right doesn't like that book. Why? Because it has talking animals, and there are no talking animals in the Bible. Now think about this.
Wow.
That is not true. There's a talking animal in the first book.
There's a talking bush.
A snake. Yeah. A snake. So look at that snake screwed up. But it gets worse, I said. The last time I was invited on Fox News, which I didn't do, I was supposed to have a debate on a Saturday morning at 6:30 in the morning on Fox and Friends. This was the Fox and Friends. Oh, please.
They better have lots of locks.
And lots of coffee, and they better send a car, which they generally did. I said, well, who's going to be on the other side? What is this about? And they said, well, we have the creator of Veggie Tales. Oh, yes. Veggie Tale. There's a talking vegetables, talking about Bible stories.
Oh, where's my hairbrush?
But I must have skipped the seminary class where they explained that talking vegetables are great. Talking animals, satanic.
Hey, do you like clothing that's well made? If you're listening to us, we assume you do. Our longtime comrade, Ava Kuehl, is the founder and creative behind a gnarly brand called Epaulet. She offers thoughtfully designed and crafted garments made right here in the USA at a non-bougie price. Epaulet staples like the Doyle work jacket, the more directional Kamigata, and the infamous Rivicino have been captivating her clientele for more than a decade. The commitment to offering unique, interesting fabrics, and the staunchly consistent fit is unrivaled. From casual outerwear to made-to-order RTC tailored clothing, Epaulet offers a garment for any occasion. Visit epauletteforend.com and enter the code DUDCAST10 for 10% off your first order.
It's so bizarre. My aunt is like rabid atheist. She is like PhD chemical engineering, you know. So she raised her kids with nothing, with no religion at all.
Yep.
So they were confused when people were talking about Easter. But she allowed them to watch VeggieTales because it was so well done and funny. So VeggieTales works even for a doctor of chemical engineering, right?
Absolutely. But it was just, just censorship. I hate it. I've hated it since high school.
Right.
In the same way I've hated conscription since high school.
Right.
I hate the draft. I don't ever want it to come back. When people go, well, we're going to make it, it's going to be fairer this time.
Right.
Listen, as soon as you allow a single exemption, you have just made it unfair, because you are always going to find the Donald Trumps of the world that are going to go to a doctor and they go, oh, like extreme heel pain. So you're out. Or there were proposals to bring draft registration back, and I was, of course, against that. And they brought it back. Jimmy Carter was against it. Then he was for it, and it eventually got started. So I looked at the data. There's a guy that I know who lives in San Francisco who's obsessive about this. He was one of the few people actually prosecuted for failing to register. He wrote a note to the Justice Department and said, here's where I am. I'm not going to sign up. So if you want to come get me, come get me. And they did.
Oh, wow.
But you know how many people were ever prosecuted since we've come back with draft registration? 18. 17 of them, 16 of them wrote a similar note saying, come and get me. And one guy was a Laotian refugee who probably frankly didn't even know he was supposed to register.
Right.
But if you have 18 people, literally millions of people have violated the draft laws since that went in effect in the early days of the Reagan administration.
We're talking about selective service, right?
Yeah, selective service. And you're still supposed to sign up. If you go to a post office, most of them still have forms.
Right.
They try to get you with all kinds of stuff. If you're applying for food stamps, if you're applying for whatever, there's a draft thing. Like if they find out that you ducked it, they're going to kill you. Like, yeah.
But the idea was, if you don't tell them that you've moved, if you don't tell them your change of address, that's the same penalty. 5 years, $10,000, 5 years in prison. 18 people. And they do rely on these secondary issues. They won't give you food stamps. They won't give you a driver's license in some states if you can't prove that you've registered for the draft. But even if you have registered, you probably haven't changed your address. And as a consequence, I saw something pop up. It said, we've been disconnected. Yeah, I saw it. It said, disconnected. Now it's reconnected.
Oh yeah, this is a miracle of technology.
The miracle of technology. Anyway, it's like obscenity law. It's like most people who don't like porn, not saying everybody, but most people who really hate it, really hate the underlying conduct. They don't like porn because they don't like that people who are gay, for example, are having fun sexually.
Yeah.
I mean, when I spent an entire 18 months destroying something called the Ed Meese Commission on Pornography, set up during the Reagan years. And I was at the ACLU at the time, and I knew this was coming. And so I went to my boss and to the boss in New York. I said, I really want to fight these people. I just hate them. I know what they're going to do. And I said, I also know, not being a woman, maybe you should have a woman do this. And then I thought, no, that's just stupid. And I knew that the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU was going to be very helpful. And I knew this was the piece of the ACLU that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the head of for a while.
Sure.
But I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to every one of their meetings. I'm going to give them as much trouble as humanly possible. When they announced who was on the commission, everybody called me and asked, what do you think of this? And I said, I think a train marked censorship has just left the station.
Oh,
and
shit.
That was a quote of the day in the New York Times. And I thought, man, that's good. I'm glad I can do that. But then everybody said, this guy can give good quotes. We should go to him all the time.
Right,
And
right.
that's what I did. And my favorite episode of this, all of these are chronicled in great detail in Paid to Piss People Off, this case, volume 2, where they decide to go to Houston, Texas, and go on a field trip to 3 adult bookstores. And I mean, these are like the scuzziest bookstores you can imagine, like water running down over the floor. So the third
You
one
can
was
smell
the
them.
worst. And I'm sure you don't know what buddy booths are, but
I can guess. Well, why don't you tell us what buddy booths
okay,
are?
buddy
Barry?
booth.
I
This
could
is the
infer.
idea. You could go into these booths and put a little token in or a quarter in, and then you could watch like 3 minutes of a porn loop, and then you could put another token in. I'm in this buddy booth with Henry Hudson, who now sadly is a federal judge in Virginia. And I mean, well, when you do that, they got to give you something. So they gave, and Ellen Levine, who was a remarkably progressive woman, who was then the editor of Woman's Day magazine. And so Henry, we're watching 2 gay men wearing green rubber monster masks having sex.
Perfect.
And Henry says to me, Barry, when you testified, which I had done months earlier, when you testified, you said all of these films have ideas. What's the idea of this? And I said, well, Henry, how about try it? You might like it. And Ellen was already souring on it. Eventually, she basically said that the conclusions, which are all, let's find new ways to censor stuff, had no credibility. So she was quite a vocal opponent of their conclusions. But I could tell she was just trying not to laugh.
Right.
I knew her heart was in the right place.
Of course.
But there's another thing. There hasn't been a successful obscenity. Leave child pornography aside. I couldn't care less if he stopped that. But when you've got consenting adults involved in sexual activity, whether you choose to engage in that activity or not, people have a right to do that.
Right.
And there hasn't been a successful obscenity prosecution for probably the last 8 years. And why is that? And part of the reason is juries don't like to convict people, because let's say they're prosecuting Debbie Does Dallas.
Of course.
And you watch
Classic.
Debbie Does Dallas episode 16. I don't know if there were that many, but
right.
you watched it at home on a DVD the weekend before. Why would you send somebody to jail for 5 years or fine them millions of dollars because they were watching something you just watched in your own family 2 weeks before?
Right.
It's absolutely insane. And that's why prosecutors, although they claimed after the Mies Pornography Commission left, there would be thousands. I remember one guy in Utah said there would be thousands of prosecutions based on this conclusions.
Yeah.
They're so
They weren't.
It reminds, like, in a modern day context, it's kind of like the right war on drag shows and drag queens and shit.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, how many, like, give me 10 examples. Fuck, give me 5 examples
One.
of one example of a trans or drag person that is convicted for some fucked up shit, like
mass shooting, murder, child pornography.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm like, give me a example of one of these people being a predator of children, being a sexual abuser, etc., like we see priests and cops and Boy Scout leaders and whatever the fuck all the time.
Yep. Well, it's that's a good question for which there is no good answer. But they find these things and they convince people. Up here in Hanover, Massachusetts, not to be confused with Hanover, New Hampshire, and you may have heard, is a F place. But
right.
There was a school board race up here, and I said, we didn't know. We had just moved up here, and we did register to vote up here, and so we were going to vote. And I'd heard that there was one person on the school board who was a right-wing nut, and I didn't know who, but there were a lot of people around running for office. So I talked to them, and finally I talked to a woman who just gave off the kind of a is she really a sane person vibe. And I said, what's the biggest thing that you hope to do if you get on the school board? And she said, cut the budget. I said, cut the budget? The schools are really hurting for money, this place and everywhere else. Why would you want to do that? She said, because they're teaching critical race theory.
Oh, Jesus.
Dun, dun, dun. We made it 54 minutes without announcing that vile, disgusting topic.
Absolutely. I said, gee, I thought that was something they occasionally teach in law school. It's here? And she said, oh, yeah, it's here. And it gets worse. And it gets worse, she said. I said, what's worse? And she said, the Jews have brought in some people from one of those Jewish organizations that teach about anti-Semitism in our high school. I said, the Jews did that? And I thought, oh, man.
The nerve.
Yeah.
The nerve of that group
Christ.
of people. But luckily, she lost election.
Good.
Do you think there's always a boogeyman? I mean, do you think that there's always that, so it was the specter of communism, which of course is Marx's own words, right?
Right.
But then we had all kinds of stuff. We had the Nazis, we had the Axis, we had communism again. We've got now, what is it even? It's so hard to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, drag queens.
Right.
Yeah.
Public enemy number one.
Talking animals.
Mm.
They still are going after that.
They need to bring back VeggieTales so that someone has incisive criticisms and critiques of religion in modern America.
Yeah, they're probably not going to do that. No, the VeggieTales people, they're still back. And one of them has, to his credit, the only two guys that created it, has kind of moderated his beliefs on race. But not it's always nice stuff.
Right.
No, that's too scary. That's so frightening.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't that, it would be something else. One of the things about censorship, which
you think so?
Yeah, I mean, I think they would simply find something else. One of the things, because porn really divides people, and there are plenty of feminists on both sides of that question.
Right.
But when somebody says, why don't we just specify the kind of porn you can't make?
No gay porn.
No gay porn.
We hate gay porn. We hate it.
Gay porn.
Yeah.
No, one of the guys. It's hard.
Well, it's redundant. It's a redundant phrase. Even gay porn. It's just porn. All porn is porn.
It's porn is porn. So we had I spent 6 months after the Porn Commission abandoned its duty and issued its final report. Ironically, Henry Hudson, the aforementioned now federal judge,
Mm.
handed the huge 2-volume bound set of the Porn Commission to Ed Meese, the Attorney General during the Reagan years, under the statue of the goddess of justice.
They
That,
really just have no soul.
but they didn't know the goddess of justice had a bare breast. And by this time, I mean, I had ticked them off. So they couldn't stop me from coming. But they said, "We're not letting you into the main room. You have to watch this." And so I was watching from another room in the Justice Department. And every once in a while, they would kind of screw in a microphone and look up and laugh. And I go, "What are they laughing at?" And then I thought, "Oh my God, it's the bare-breasted goddess of justice." And just to confirm how silly all of this was, they actually had a debate during the course of the commission meetings over whether Michelangelo's famous statue of David, where you can see a
Winky.
winky,
Yeah.
whether that was pornographic. And two people kind of said it was. One was James Dobson, the head of
Of course.
Yeah.
and the other was Father Bruce Ritter. Father Bruce Ritter allegedly set up this place for homeless children in New York.
Red flags. Red flags.
And well, it got worse because during the course of the Porn Commission, a couple of journalists found something interesting. He was hiring young men to stay in his room at the expense of the taxpayers of America during these commission meetings. And he was not prosecuted for anything. And these were not children.
Yeah.
They were teenagers, but they were minors.
Yeah.
And so he was moved from the Archdiocese of New York to India to spend.
Oh, right, where there's no oversight at all.
There's nothing except cows.
Right.
Yes. But so they didn't prosecute him for anything but the New York City Attorney General, who we love lately. I mean, I love the Attorney General in New York City. In the last
they've been doing some decent work.
Yeah, he's been doing some great work. But anyways, he sent him away. But you can't, if you said, I know I was going somewhere with it. Oh yeah, afterwards there were debates about porn. I mean, the Porn Commission, and I talked to a lot of groups, and I spoke to a group somewhere in the Eastern Shore, and there was a very popular professor, Midwest professor of I don't know technically what he was, English literature or something, but he was very much against censorship, and he was my partner. And the other side, they had, among other things, a guy who, outside of the Vatican, may have the largest porn collection in the world, and he was
wow. So you really did say the best for last.
Yeah, and what he did. My partner, I love the guy, but he thought we were going to be talking about Lady Chatterley's lover.
Mm.
I said, I think we're going to be subjected to something a little more graphic than that. And so this character, who was a psychiatrist, showed nothing but this is a subset of porn. Genital mutilation.
Oh yeah, dude. Nice.
Yeah.
Like the BME Pain Olympics, you got cock and ball torture. Yeah.
And that's all he showed. And so my colleague is kind of at a loss because he thought we were really having an argument about, kind of classic English literature and whether that was obscene. And he was not prepared, I think, he was not prepared.
You gotta love it.
Scene. But anyway, it was Park Dietz was the name of the guy. Mark Dietz later became, well, I don't know what he's doing now. But, the other people in that commission, they were so strange. They had a constitutional law professor. He was at the University of Michigan Law School at the time. When asked what he thought about porn, he said pornography is not entitled to any First Amendment protection. It's more akin to a visit to a prostitute or the use of a dildo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Perfect.
But
That's
he was
like,
their expert. They would turn to him. What do you think, Professor? He later moved to the University of Virginia, where he apparently was a professor of my own daughter when she went to law school there, because I saw him at graduation
wow.
and he was there and we commiserated. But you can't, it's a little bit like abortion. This is going to have enormous blowback in the upcoming election. There's just no question about it. And the more states that have initiative campaigns to do something like guarantee the right, at least the right as far as Roe versus Wade took it, the right to make a choice about terminating a pregnancy, the more of those that are on the ballot, the more the chances are that terrible people will not be reelected or
Right.
elected in their states. If you find those things and you do it, the one thing, I go back to this, you can't hate people. You cannot hate the people on the other side, but you can sure use the rules that do exist to try to stop them. You can hate everything they stand for, and you can argue with them accordingly. That's what I've been doing ever since this young guy came to a party of ours and said he wanted to do what I did when he got out of school. And I said, well, what do you think I do? And he said, I think you get paid to piss people off. And today, that man is not only a fashionista, but a well-respected podcaster.
Wow, Barry, you are a gentleman and a scholar, as trite as that is, but at the very least, very entertaining, even still in your advanced age. Just
Yeah, well,
fantastic.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
thank you so much
this
for
has been
coming
fucking
on.
great, and like we didn't really talk clothes once, but I'm also
Even though you wore the Ed Hardy.
yeah, you did wear it.
Ed Hardy got this at Las Vegas. I used to speak in Las Vegas. You know who I like to talk to in Las Vegas? Librarians. They're my favorite audience because they're all against censorship,
right.
and they. I talked to them there, and of course there was. I'll close with this.
Sure.
There was an episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show I was on with a guy from the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is where, among other people, the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Oh, sweet. What a wonderful dude.
He's a great guy. I mean, he's not a great guy. If I had a nickel for every plea I got from Hakeem Jeffries about, I want to be Speaker of the House. He had a chance to be Speaker of the House. He should have bitten his tongue, let Marjorie Taylor Greene oust Mike Johnson by having all the Democrats do, because Mike Johnson is a Christian nationalist. He says he is. You don't have to wonder if he is. He said after his election, he was on Hannity. Hannity asks him, well, where would they find you get your values? And he said, go to your bookshelf, pick up a Bible and open it. That's where values come from.
Yeah.
So he's a dangerous person, but
Marjorie Taylor Greene is my rep, and I hate her.
Is that true?
Yeah, I hate
not her. Like you're not like you're lying, but like holy shit,
I hate her with the fire of 1,000 fucking suns. Like small side note. If you don't know about the last person that ran against her, whenever the fuck she got elected, what was that, 2018? It is one of the saddest stories I have ever read in my entire life. Like, this dude was just a normal ass person and had to flee the state because her follower, But yeah, it's on like every major mainstream news.
Sure.
Maybe not Fox, but everything else. So go look that up. She is the dumbest spawn of Satan I've ever witnessed in my entire life. Sorry, not to derail.
So I think you won't be voting for her.
I will not be voting for her.
I think I was in the middle of a story I've forgotten. Where was I even going?
Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Hakeem
Jeffries,
nationalists.
Yeah.
I mean, please, a lot of good progressive people don't agree with me, but I just think they should have gotten rid of him. He is not just a conservative. He is a Christian nationalist conservative. He is third in line for the presidency. He believes the Bible gives answers for everything, not just gay rights and abortion, which, by the way, no, abortion isn't even criticized in the Bible. In fact.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, then maybe he could do something now. I know there's a thought that, well, maybe he'll allow the Democrats to, pass another funding bill in the late fall, and it doesn't matter. It's kind of like expanding the Supreme Court. Of course, it's corrupted. It's not just corrupted because of the gifts that have been given to people like Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas, but it is absolutely It's crippling every understanding that reasonable people have about what the Constitution means. And the late Phyllis Schlafly and I agreed about only one thing, and that was that we shouldn't have a constitutional convention. She was afraid too many progressives would show up and put all kinds of stuff into the Constitution that she didn't like. And I had the same fear, but unfortunately I thought, if the conservatives come and the liberals come, the liberals they're not gonna stay long enough to make a difference. I find out that liberals tend to, they tend to go home early. They don't stay for the whole thing.
Yeah, I make a good reference to the Great Kentekoff incident of 2020. From the liberals, and it just like, y'all grow some fucking balls, like, not to gender,
or you read a book, read a book. Don't do that. That's obviously offensive.
Exactly. But if you can't, if you're offended, everybody is offended by everything. I taught, before I was even on the board of the Kurt Vonnegut Museum, I taught webinars there in the summers about free speech, and one of them was called "Everyone Hates Something, Let's Just Ban Everything." And it was very well received. I think it may even be up on my website, which is barrywlynn.com.
Yes, everyone go visit Barry's website.
Yeah,
Barry's got an Instagram. Barry's got There's an Instagram. There's a Facebook. There's all kinds of stuff. Barry is a legendary poster. Barry posts like at least once every day, and it's funny. So I would give him a follow for sure.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope we chatted about the things you wanted to chat about, and
it exceeded expectations.
It's been a goddamn joy.
Yeah, it really has been awesome.
Yeah,
it's been great. I thought, but much better.
Thanks very much.
We appreciate you coming on, Barry. Thank you so much.
Happy to do it.
If you would like to send us questions, comments, concerns, or just a fucking meme in our email, it's apocalypsestuds@gmail.com. We are at apocalypsestuds on Instagram. I am Matt Smith at Rebels Rogues.
And I'm Connor Fowler at Connor Flower.
Connor Flower?
Wow.
I changed it.
Okay.
Connor Flower? What does that mean?
Well, it's my name with the letters jumbled.
Oh, man.
I support it.
Yeah, you love throwing a wrench into the system, motherfucker.
I surely do. And one day the wrench will hit the right part of the system and we will all be living in a communist paradise.
All right, y'all.
So we bid you adieu. Thank you.
We bid you adieu. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you both.